Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Thank you for joining me today for a conversation with Mars Fernandez, or otherwise known as upperhandMars. If this is your first time here, I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can be notified when I make new content, especially live shows like this one. I do them live because I want them to be like a meeting place, town hall. I want you guys to participate, talk to each other, share ideas. And who knows, you might have some questions that we can answer while you're here too. So I've asked Mars to come here. If you're not familiar with Mars, he's a YouTuber. And he's also a trans man. And I have watched his channel. I've watched a bunch of his videos, and I've been very amused and diverted by them. I think they're meant to be amusing and diverting. Am I wrong? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So his channel came up, suggested to me as something to watch. I watched, and I was so thoroughly amused. I said, people need to hear from this individual because we spend a lot of time on this channel. I talk a lot about gender issues going on in schools and the topic of gender education, gender ideology, whatever. And I'm trying to platform people who have different opinions, who are, we hear from the people who think it's a great idea all the time. Not on this channel per se, but I don't think they'd want to talk to me, but we hear from them. They've got a platform. They've got lots of platforms. And the people who don't get as much notice as I think they deserve are real people out there just living their lives. And they may or may not agree with all this going on. And yet they're being represented. They're being talked about. And so I saw what Mars was doing. And I said, first of all, I think he needs a bigger audience. So please go subscribe. Second of all, I think I have questions that only he can answer, only somebody like him can answer, and that maybe, you guys have too. So Mars, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honestly a little nervous because I haven't done a live in a while, but I do understand like how it's the conversation, being able to participate with people. So, but I'm really glad to be here. Honestly, appreciate it.
Well, you're so welcome. So, I want to kind of deal with something right up front, if it's okay with you.
Yeah,
and I know it's a little controversial. I have a confession to make.
Mm-hmm.
So already I've been sitting here and going, he, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have identified yourself as a trans man, and I'm not a rude asshole. And so the way that's my opinion, is if somebody is telling me straight up, this is who I am and how I live my life, it's no skin off my nose to oblige them with what they're asking me to do. Okay. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, I'm conflicted. And I'm wondering if maybe you can, I'm super conflicted when it comes to, minor children. And when the demand is made, for example, or a demand is made of somebody by somebody who is not living their life appearing or having made any kind of a transition, and yet they're demanding a different pronoun. And so I'm really conflicted, because then I start to feel like, well, now I feel like you're asking me to participate in something above and beyond politeness, above and beyond human decency, above and beyond just two people having an interaction, and being nice. Now you're asking me to go along with something that's more than that, but I can't really articulate what that is. Am I making any sense? First of all, like what I'm saying as far as my weirdness? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely makes sense.
I brought it up because I had Buck Angel on here, mm-hmm. and I got some criticism from people who were like, why are you validating this? Why are you saying he and him? And I've got a lot of pushback, especially from feminists, mm-hmm. saying, and I'm not, just full disclosure, I'm not specifically a feminist. Okay. I don't necessarily like oppose anything, but perhaps like maybe some radical stuff. But I'm just not, like you said, I'm not into labels. I don't want to fit into a neat little box. Right. Yeah. And so, but I got pushback. People like, why are you doing this? You're validating this whole ideology when you do that. And I disagree. I don't think I'm validating the whole, like everything that's trying to happen, that people are trying to do and push on our kids, when I'm dealing one-on-one with a person and I have a better sense of who they are and what they believe, then I feel like it's I can't explain it. I feel like it's part of manners then. But we also have like Jordan Peterson says, I absolutely will not do it. So what is your take?
Yeah, my take. This is my personal take, and also I 100% agree with the labels. Um, if you claim to be part of a certain group, you're expected to, abide by their rules or live up to their expectations. So, at this point, we have now seen, I think, many groups become very radical, and you can't live up to it. So, I personally give up. I think I lean more towards like in the I value a lot of what conservatives believe in, but I also don't call myself a conservative. I believe in some liberal things, but with what you said as far as pronouns, I've seen this a lot. I've seen it a lot more now, and I think that's because things have escalated to such a point that people want to fight back against this. Um, However necessary. So I personally have never demanded or asked anybody to refer to me as he, him. Now, obviously, at least in my case, the whole point of medical transition was to re enter the world as much as I can socially because my biology didn't change, to be seen, perceived as, a man. That was the point. So if I get called he, him outside, going through my daily life, like that's where I want to be. But I would never. I don't like to bring discomfort to people, just as I don't want people to make me uncomfortable. So I've always found it very uncomfortable to challenge someone and tell them that actually no, it's he, him. I just won't do it. I would rather you make me uncomfortable, if anything. But that's not a part of my character. So I've never had that conversation with anybody, with the exception, there was one time at one of my jobs several years back where a guy that I worked with, he knew that I was transitioning, but he was confused about the pronouns thing. And there was a social situation where we were at work and a couple of his friends came by, and his friends were just instantly, automatically seeing me as a he, him. But then my coworker would kind of go back to she, her. And it was weird because there was like all these pronouns around me. And that's, it's a little odd. But in that situation, I didn't challenge him because if he perceives me like that, whatever, if he prefers that, whatever. Like, I think that, it does suck. Okay. I will say that. I understand how some people who are trans get offended and it sucks to not hear what you want to hear. But at the same time, like that's just life. You're not going to always get what you want. And so, I had a very minor conversation with him through text and I said, hey man, like, if you prefer to call me she, her, like that's whatever, but also it's okay. Like if, you're uncomfortable with this, and it was very minor, but I said, like if you had any questions, just ask me. There is a politeness, manners, right? You talked about manners and you're right. Like, a lot of people see the pronoun issue as being, well, it depends who you ask. Like radical people, right? Radical trans activists will see it as you have to, you must like demand. If you care about me, you will say that. But then you have just regular, ordinary people that want to do it out of politeness, which I understand too. And then now we're at the point where a lot of people have realized that politeness might be a part of the problem. Well, we shouldn't be nice about this at all. We should just full stop, not validate these people, which is how they see it. I've seen this a lot, from some of these feminists, the same feminists that 4 years ago said, Mars, you're always welcome in our spaces. You're one of our, you're a sister to us. For like now, current times, a lot of the same people that were, nice back then are now like, Mars, you're a traitor. How could you turn your back on women? I've been called a groomer too, right? Like, so this is a problem when things become so radical, and I blame full on the left, the trans radical activists for the situation that's happening today, right? Because they're so radical, you're going to get pushback. So now you have people that don't want to be polite in any sort of sense because they believe that if you say he, him to me, that means that you are, in agreement with gender ideology, which I find to be silly. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that because you're, because you and I grabbed coffee and you said he, him to me out in public, does that mean that you believe that I am 100% biological male? Of course not. But again, because things have escalated, I understand why now there's pushback, and it sucks to see it. It's very frustrating, especially for me. I feel like I'm kind of centered with a lot of my opinions, and I constantly feel like I'm stuck between two sort of radical groups in a way for different reasons.
Well, and as you know, somebody who's trying to be an educator, like a parent educator, and also representing kids and so forth, I feel, not it's not even close to the same kind of stuck, but there's like a different kind of stuck, as I said to you at the outset, because, and I really should back up and say, not, rude asshole. Okay, as Mars is pointing out, there's a lot of, I hate the word, but nuance to the situation. That what I meant was, if I've met someone, okay, we've been introduced, even if it's just been online, and I'm on a first name basis with the person. I know their character, I know what they're about. And I know that the reason they transitioned, as you said, was because they just wanted the outside to match how they wanted to be seen in the world. And that's their perception of it. Okay. They are aware of the fact that this isn't the literal biological reality, whatever. Then I feel like it's actually, to be honest with you, 50-50. 50%, because I just think it's a nice thing to do to somebody you met, know them, you get the gist of it. The other 50% is honestly my convenience, because the transition has been successful. What you meant to do, if I saw you out and I never met you before, I would think you were male, right? I would refer to you as he, him, and I wouldn't even be thinking twice about it. So in that respect, why were pronouns created? They were created for the convenience of the speaker and the writer, as shorthand, so you don't have to keep saying the person's name, And so then I just kind of fall back to that of, honestly, audience, it's just easier. It truly is easier. If I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at them, and they are appearing to me male, masculine, and I also know that that's what they would like to be seen as in the world, that doesn't bother me. It's kind of no skin off my nose. At the same time, I do understand what Mars is saying. And correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that people are feeling so frustrated with the level of extremism. They see this as like their little miniature battle. Like I'm not going to give an inch on this battlefield, because I feel like once I do, or maybe we have, and that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, exactly. They want to fight every part of it. And I understand someone in the chat said, I just use their name instead of pronoun. I've never had a problem with that. Use my name. That's fine. But I think that there are a lot happening right now because of gender ideology that we should be fighting back on. But I think that we get caught up in a lot of little things. Now, I know people get upset with me saying this, but for example, in the way I see the pronoun thing, for me, I've always seen it as like a social thing. If we're hanging out, we're friends, socially, like, it's not a big deal. Now, I do see the issue when it becomes like legal, right? So, or like when we see a man, clearly a man, right, rapes a woman. The article is now written as a woman, raped a woman, but we know it's a male, looks like a male, is a male. So what are we doing? So that's where it does get complicated. And I do have a problem with that. I would feel exactly the same if at any point in my life, which I have no plans to, but if I was a criminal and I was going to commit a crime, I would hope that, because I've now committed this crime and the stats matter, that you would be literal in what you're talking about, right? We're talking about a female because I am a female. But socially, I honestly, like I said, no skin off my back, I don't see the big deal socially. I do see it an issue when we're talking about how, misgendering is a crime, or reporting something like, a man who identifies as a woman raped a woman. Like, no, that's just a man. So that's where I think it becomes complicated, and it should be complicated. We should stick to the truth in those scenarios. But people that have become so upset and frustrated with things that they get bothered when I have a conversation with somebody and I use a pronoun for them or they use a pronoun for me, it's like, we're just having a conversation. Like, I mean, I'm sorry that you're bothered, but I understand why you're bothered, but like, don't fight everybody on this. And that's another thing that I've come to be really frustrated with, is that anybody who identifies as trans is a part of the problem, because trans is a brand. Then I'm, grooming kids and all this other stuff. And it's like, have you watched my content? I've always questioned myself, the whole trans thing. I've really tried to be honest about this stuff. And, I'm still the bad guy. And that's the problem with the outcome that could happen with all this, is who the bad guys become. Well, the entire LGBT, everybody. is a bad guy because of a bunch of radical trans activists who honestly are just mentally ill men. Like most of these people are just mentally ill men. And that's kind of how I see the whole thing is that, just like, gender identity, to me, it's a mental health disorder. We don't want to acknowledge that because there's a stigma to it. So we destigmatize it and we say, you know what? It's not a mental health issue. Meanwhile, the whole point of these people is they're fighting for, the right to medically transition. But then we see that there are different types, right? I'm not going to go into a GameStop and lose it on someone because they don't call me a man. And we see that some of these people quite literally believe that they are now the sex that they identify with, which is insane. So there's different types of, a person that identifies as trans. And I wish people could understand that more. I guess I'm asking for a little bit of empathy. I don't know, but it's kind of like somebody's bipolar. Not every bipolar person has the same level of, that disorder. There's different types. So there's different types of people that have dysphoria. And in fact, we know that there's a lot of people that don't have dysphoria and they're just trans because it's a fetish for them, So
okay. So you do think they're okay. Well, given that what we're talking about is something that, is connected to a disorder, gender dysphoria.
Mhm.
And then, when I think of people who have any kind of a disorder, I think they need care.
Yeah.
They need care. I mean, they don't need our hate. They need some health care. They need somebody to help them. So, and the idea behind care is that you would, find a treatment. So if you can't be made well, whatever that would look like, okay,
Yeah.
then, so in other words, if you're not going to like wake up someday and go, oh, well, that was dysphoria and I don't feel like that anymore, then maybe the treatment is, right, like you said, medical transition at some point. But what is baffling to me is how things changed from what the protocol and the standard of care was. And I've been to some seminars about this, what it was in the past to what it has become now.
Mhm.
And I mean, why do you feel like things changed as far as going from, okay, let's go to therapy, let's talk about it, let's work through it, and then maybe you at some point in adulthood, maybe you socially transition, you know what I'm saying? And now it's gone to a 2-year-old
Yeah.
says, I think I'm a cat. And they're like, okay, so you're a cat, like you could be anything, not just woman or man if you're not already a male or female. Why do you think that happened?
I think all these institutions have been captured by activists. I think that this ideology has, it's been infecting all these institutions and spreading like a disease. I mean, I don't know what else to say except that it is a problem that people didn't think it would become such a. I don't think anybody saw this coming. And so, maybe politeness is a part of the issue, but not enough people push back on it. And still, not enough people push back on it today, still, because fear, right? You're scared. You don't want to lose your friends, family, career, so you don't say nothing. And you know what? I've said this many times on my channel. I understood that like 5 years ago, but now I'm just sick of people that are cowards. I really am, because a lot of us who have been fighting this have been getting crap too. And it's just, yeah, I would say it's happened because of an ideology. I don't think you were talking about like medical transition and it being a treatment. Well, I don't think that's right in itself. Is it a treatment? Because when you're talking about gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder, whichever one you prefer to use to refer to it as, that's a mental health issue. Like we should be able to agree on that it is a mental health issue. And if it's not a mental health issue, then why are insurance companies covering it? If it's not, that doesn't make any sense. And also, it is pretty backwards that because I feel a certain way in my head, then this doctor is going to fix everything outside of like, you're going to fix my issues by working on the exterior instead of the interior. Now, this is not to say that I'm against transition. I got from transition, for the most part, what I wanted from it. I just think that medical transition, trans healthcare, it's bogus, and it shouldn't be called that, because really it's not actually getting into the mental health issue of it. So maybe, it should be called like plastic surgery or something else. I don't know what, but I think that there's a lot of word trickery to this stuff, right? Every time I hear trans healthcare, I just want to throw up because I'm like, what trans healthcare? You know, when I got prescribed testosterone, she didn't know much. I ended up telling her stuff she didn't know. She seemed confused. Yet she gave me testosterone the day of, not a big deal. So it's not trans healthcare. And if it is trans healthcare, then it should include, you know, the so-called tiny percentage of detransitioners when they detransition. Where do they go? Well, it doesn't matter, right? Because, yeah, so I have a huge problem with, I mean, there's a lot to question on the ethics behind this. It's just so sloppy and backwards, and it's frustrating because, you know, the liberals that are against this or have a problem with it, they don't really, a lot of them haven't been speaking out. So now what we have is conservatives have taken over this whole thing, which in some cases it's okay because some of them have been kind of reasonable about what they're trying to do with it. But in other cases, we see that it's not okay. You know, because the way that it's handled, it's coming from quite possibly, I don't know, a religious right point of view, and it just doesn't work. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think I just
Yeah,
missed
no,
it.
I
You
think
get what
I
I'm
think
saying?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And I mean, we could probably talk all day about the finances behind it. There's probably a
Yeah.
lot of people making a lot of money. There's always money behind anything that's medical, right?
Right. Exactly.
But the ideology part is so perplexing to me. Maybe this would be a good time for if you could tell us, your story so we can understand. Because remember too, like the press and everybody,
Mhm.
they give us a very almost formulaic look at transitioning. And where they'll show us Caitlyn Jenner, right? And then of course she says something wrong and they're like, oh, don't listen to her,
Yeah.
or they'll show or him. And then they'll show us somebody else and that they do like and they'll celebrate it, whatever. But we don't really hear that often from people like you who are willing to say like this is a mental illness, etc. But so what was your process and your story?
Yeah, sure. My story is, I think, very similar to other homosexuals. You know, it's very common for us to be gender nonconforming, and because we're gender nonconforming, we're going to have some level of dysphoria. Now, in my opinion, or that's my opinion, right? I think I do believe that a lot of homosexuals just will naturally be gender nonconforming, and therefore you're going to have dysphoria because society is very, you know, kind of binary with this, right? Like men are supposed to be this and women are supposed to be a certain way. And while things have changed in that sense, like I'm not saying that we're still living like in the 1940s, but you know, I do think that that probably had some impact on me as a child. But a lot of it too was, you know, not just socially, but biologically, right? Like I've always understood that I am a female, and that's something that never changed when I, you know, started identifying as trans. I've never thought that you could change your sex. That could be also because I didn't transition until I was in my 30s. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe if I had transitioned at 18, I would have had this delusion, but I never had that. So I've always had dysphoria, and you know, this is another thing too with the treatment, right? So when I think of my entire life, there are patterns there of someone who obviously had mental health issues throughout my life, right? So I dabbled in drugs, I dabbled in drinking way too much, I dabbled in cutting, you know, there's stuff that I did, you know, there was a lot of self-harm because I was never feeling right in my body. And then you know, eventually it took me to transition. Now, again, I'm not saying, you know, I think that there are reasons people transition and we need to be cautious about that. I don't think transition is for anybody under the age of 18. In fact, I mean, I don't even know if 18 is the right age, to be honest, because a lot that comes with transition is really life changing and you can't go back, right? So yeah, my life's my basically I've always had dysphoria, I guess, to kind of answer your question. And then I don't know, I started having panic attacks. Things got really bad. And eventually, I considered transition. I was very much on the fence about it because I've always been probably too much of a thinker. So I wasn't sure about doing it because I was always concerned with the health issues that could come from it, right? Which oddly enough is why I stopped taking testosterone, is because of the health issues that I got. So So that was always a big issue with it. But yeah, I was on testosterone for like, I don't know, almost 3 years. And then I got off of it. And yeah, now I'm still living like this, which some people get upset about that, and it's like I go back to what I was saying earlier, don't fight everybody on every little thing. People get upset because, okay, I'm not on testosterone. So then why do you call yourself trans? So why are you he, him? Who cares? Why does it bother you? If I'm not forcing it on you, then why do you care? Like I'm comfortable like this. I don't know that I'll ever explain it in a way that makes sense to everyone. But for me, I'm totally chill with how I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the issue? Again, the issue should be, let's take care of kids, make sure they don't get to do this, because
Mm-hmm.
how's a 3-year-old going to know who they are? I didn't know who I was at 20. I thought I did. I didn't know who I was at 30. Like we're never going to really truly know ourselves. So to go into something like this, we have to absolutely be careful and know what we're getting ourselves into. But my biggest frustration, like I said, is this treatment. I've always had mental health issues. So who knows? Maybe if I had seen an actual therapist that gave me therapy, um, maybe I wouldn't have transitioned. I'm not saying that because I regret transition, but maybe there's always that chance of might not do it, but how can I get that chance when you didn't offer it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So when you see what's going on now in schools where, it's now they're bringing it down to preschool. It was, before it was like middle school and that keeps creeping on down. And now they're saying that I just looked at some material yesterday, a magazine that goes out to teachers, and it said, yes, a 4-year-old can
Mm.
identify as trans. And then it was a story of a mom talking about how her daughter I'm sorry, her son, I think it was her son, had been, walking along with the little 4-year-old kid and had said something about, I'm a girl or whatever. And the mom is, writes this glowing story of how she essentially started, treating her daughter like her son, and now really looking forward to when she can get, puberty blockers and all this. And sorry, it's as a parent myself, it's so upsetting to me. Like I lose sleep over it. I get
Mm.
so upset because I have 3 girls. This is a problem that, I mean, it's happening across the board, but I see the ROGD issue being a
Yeah.
little bit more female, and I see the TRA issue being more male. TRA, for people who aren't aware, is like trans activists, the ones you see beating people up, beating up lesbians. Like they're attacking lesbians. They're quite
Mm.
literally homophobic. It's like
Yeah.
really scary. So, and autogynephiles, that kind of thing. So it's so upsetting to me that I I almost can't talk intelligently about it. And when I saw Matt Walsh's movie and saw some of this one pediatrician with the blue hair, I wouldn't have been able to stay calm. Like
Yeah.
I
Me,
give
me
him
neither.
credit. I would have been like
Yeah.
lunging out of my
Hmm.
seat, because to me this is a person who herself has mental health problems.
Yeah.
When I see
Exactly.
these people, so you agree with me? There's
A
something
hundred
wrong.
percent. No, there's something absolutely wrong. And no, you're right. The way that they deliver their what they're saying, the look on their faces, like it's eerie. It's really weird. But no, you're absolutely right. There has to be something like fundamentally wrong with somebody who is saying these things, because a rational person doesn't just say them. You're either ideologically captured, and or you also have a mental health issue. There's a therapist, a gender therapist on YouTube that I've off and on followed to see what she's been up to, kind of. And
Yep.
they started off just they're a female, right? Later on in their videos, they come out and say that they're non-binary. They cut their hair, they go by they them, and I'm like, okay, well, at this point, are you trying to offer therapy for people, or do you need the therapy?
Right.
So yeah, there's something about these people that is really off. And when we're talking about kids, um, that's I don't know what to say about it. It's just disgusting, and it really upsets me because that's one thing you just don't mess with, right? It's a child.
Mhm.
They're innocent. They have no idea what they want. You're an adult. You're supposed to guide them. You're supposed to keep them away from things that could harm them. So why on earth are we pausing a child's puberty you know, because they were naturally healthy, and now you decided to step in and ruin that chance. It is really sick. Um, yeah, and I do think though, like you said, I think you said ROGD is mostly a girl issue.
It's primarily, I'm not saying it
Yeah.
never happens with the boys, but
Mhm.
the social contagion, girls in general seem to be a little more susceptible to social contagions,
Yeah.
whether it was satanic panic or anorexia, bulimia. A lot of these things seem to work their way around small groups. And there was even a pregnancy club once upon a time. They seem to
Yeah.
work their way through groups of girls at a rate that is more than groups of boys. Boys don't really travel in groups this quite the same way. They don't do that the same way.
It's true. Yeah. I do think that boys are left out of the conversation though. And I do think that there are
That
probably a
is
lot
true.
of little boys that are being harmed as much, but because of this crazy increase with girls that never, you know, was an issue
Right.
historically, I think it does take up a lot of the conversation, and I get why it does, but I think I think in a way we're kind of failing because we're ignoring anything that happens to little boys, which I think
Oh,
we should care
I completely agree.
more
I just
to.
said yesterday on Twitter, I said, let's make this school year the year of the boy because I want to bring, I want to platform people to talk about
That's
specific
not a
issues that are getting ignored, about
that's
boys. And I
yeah.
agree with you when you think in particular about how hyper feminized it's sort of ironic, isn't it? Like the
Mhm.
school environment and the values and the whole empathy and talk about our feelings and everything. These are more temperamental or it's the temperaments, like as Jordan Peterson would talk about it, of that are typically feminine. We would call them. They are present in all of us,
Yeah.
but okay. So then we gear it like that. So if you're a more typical masculine boy, okay, or at least average, and you're hearing on a daily basis how awful you are, like you're like a pre-rapist, I mean, it's
Exactly.
you're hearing all these negative messages. It's got to really work on them.
Yeah.
And I would imagine saying that you're whether it's trans or non-binary or something that you may or may not be, just so you
Yeah.
can demasculinize yourself to feel safe in that environment, is probably affecting a
Yep.
decent number of them. And then of course, and this is going to sound weird, but here it is, the devouring mother Munchausen thing seems to be much more common in mothers of sons. And I don't want to impugn mothers of sons. I'm just saying there's a pattern that I'm seeing where I'm seeing, when my son told me he was trying, my son, and these mothers are turning their boys into girls. And that's concerning. I mean, I'm seeing both, but I'm seeing that a little bit more. Whereas the girls who are saying I'm now male or non-binary seem to be like kind of out of the blue.
Hmm.
Or they have other issues. They all have issues, but there's something
Yeah.
like that. And so I just think the bottom line point is that we are empowering teachers to go above and beyond even what we would call about appropriate behavior for parents.
Yeah.
Like if we saw parents having these conversations with their little kids, we might raise an eyebrow and say, "What are you doing?" But these
Mhm.
are total strangers. And they
Yeah.
work for the state, which is even
Mm.
worse in many cases. So, I don't know. But we can't stop it. Parents have tried, and I just don't. It's you're hateful, you're a bigot, you want to harm people. They bring up the suicide issue. They bring up the suicide. So as a parent, let me ask you. Kid is influenced at school by something or someone. It might not even be the teacher. It could be just peers. They come home and they tell you they're 8, they're 9, they're 12, who cares, whatever age. And they tell you, I'm now trans. And prior to that, they'd had no gender dysphoria, nothing going on.
Mhm.
Parents are wondering, what do I do? I don't want to lose my
Yeah.
child. I mean,
Mhm.
any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah,
Like, I don't,
I have a lot of thoughts on. Well, you said a lot, and you're
sorry.
talking about. No, no, it's great.
I should let you
Because
talk. You're the guest, and I'm like
no,
talking over you.
I'm
Sorry.
enjoying the conversation. So, but you were talking about how men are being made to feel a certain way, and it made me think about, whenever somebody talks about this, people get offended because they don't want to see it. Okay, this shouldn't be. I don't care what somebody's political belief is. We should be able to point this out, the patterns. If there's a pattern there, we got to recognize it, right? So you look at, not to change the subject, but there's been a lot of um, self-hating white people, right, over the past 5 years because of critical race theory and all this stuff that's been going on. So a lot of us recognize this, pattern. But some people don't. Some people that see that pattern don't want to see the other one, which is, men have been in a way made to, feel guilty because of their masculinity, right? And I'm gonna just go ahead and say it, so feminists, just chill out. But some feminists, not all of them, hashtag not all, okay, but some feminists, there's different types of feminism. I'm not gonna say which one is to blame for this, but there have been a lot of feminists that say these things, right? So this idea is put out there and you hear it over and over again. Men and their toxic masculinity, these men, they're oppressing women. And then you hear, well, women are so oppressed. There's women are not getting the same equal pay, opportunities, and all this stuff. So when you hear these things over and over again, and you're, 15, 12 years old, what do you actually think you're planting in that kid's head? You're obviously telling the girl that she can never be as strong and do the things that, men do. And in some cases, yeah, like we know biologically speaking, men and women are different in strength. But to a child, they're thinking, well, gee, it doesn't sound really great to be a woman. And to a little boy, he's thinking, well, I don't want to be the reason that women, feel like they should fear me. And yeah, that is a huge issue in society. We put that out there because one thing that I've never understood is I grew up in the 90s. I remember that it was fine to be gender neutral. It wasn't a big deal back then. So now suddenly you're telling me that it's horrible to be, I say gender neutral, but what I mean is, a guy wearing a dress like that's not new. So
Right.
why is it now, why has it been pushed to such a degree? And I honestly think that it has to do with not just that, but I think that is a part of it. You're making people feel a certain way. And yeah, girls feel more, I don't want to say girls feel more emotion, but, emotionally speaking, females and males are different. That's a biological fact, I think. But because of that, I don't doubt why so many young girls are so many cluster groups of girls, want to identify as trans. But going to your point, you're talking about if a parent has a kid that comes out as trans, honestly, if possible, and if it were me anyways, I would just take that kid out of school. That's what I would do. I know not everybody can do that, but I would do that. Or if you can't do that, I would make sure that there was a way to disconnect them from the internet a majority of the time. I know it's not possible all the time because it's 2022 and we live on our phones, but the problem with this, and why I find it so deeply disturbing is that people will blame trans YouTubers and anybody who's trans online for everything happening today, and that's fair to some extent. Like I understand how we're out there and we could be like influencing them to know about this opportunity to be trans, and being trans is not great, you shouldn't be putting it out there. I get this a lot, and what bothers me about this though is that, yeah, sure, maybe let's say I have a kid, my kid is watching YouTube and they're getting this idea of being trans on YouTube. I would be pissed at that YouTuber. Totally get it. But if that's just a YouTuber saying it and they go to school or the doctors and they're telling them totally different things, like factual based things, I just don't believe that that kid is going to be able to transition and maybe even want to be trans in 2 years. But when you're hearing the same piece of information, false information, on the internet, at the doctors, at school, with your friends, of course, that kid has no chance to survive this whatsoever. So what I'm saying is, if that kid is getting information in like 4 different places, you have to pull them away from most of those places somehow. I don't know if it means going camping with this kid more often, maybe you cutting back hours at work, but by any means necessary, spend more time with your kid and pull them away from all of these things that could continue to indoctrinate your kid. Because that to me is the worst thing. The fact that if you're telling your own child, no, you can't change your sex, but a YouTuber is, and then your teacher is, how do you fight that?
Right. Well, and if they go to school and they open their mouth and they say, my mom says or my dad says that, you're
Now they're transphobic.
delusional or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then you, in this day and age, you run the risk of losing your child legally. And so parents are absolutely petrified
I think parents have
because,
so much power in this though, and they don't know it. I mean,
okay,
honestly,
tell me
schools,
more.
schools, schools and colleges. I mean, just schools have a lot of money, right? They need this. They need you to show up with your kid. I think if parents just flat out wanted to, start fighting this, they could. But I do think that there's a lot of fear because I think a lot of this does start with kids. If you're brainwashing a 5-year-old to believe that biological sex is a spectrum, and that kid is going to continue to hear that in college, what chance does this kid have? But if before college that kid could actually know the truth, maybe they'll be a little bit more rational and they'll be like, you know what, my college professor is saying all this stuff that I've never heard in my life. That's not right. But parents are scared, and I understand that. We've seen what our own government does to parents that speak out in meetings, right? Like sometimes they're called domestic terrorists. So if you can't speak out and your kid can't speak out, again, I just always go back to, well, find a way to pull your kid from school. Honestly, when they start feeling that, when they take a financial hit because kids aren't, going to college and schools, they'll start to change things. But right now,
Right.
everything's aiming in the right direction for them, they think. But
Right.
yeah, I think that in the end, parents are gonna, I don't know, parents and detransitioners have a really good chance of fighting this. The question obviously is, are the right voices going to fight it? Because if it's not the right voices, then the entire LGBT is going to fall apart. And obviously that's not what we want. We don't want,
Right.
for example, same-sex marriage to go back to being a fight. Like that would be stupid. But that could happen because, things are so crazy that now everybody hates anybody that's LGBT, ABC, whatever, So
Well, I mean, that's something that bothers me a lot is the way, if you truly are anti, let's call it, woke, okay, you're anti, then to me, that means the blanket thing you are is anti-collectivist,
mhm.
meaning like you don't put group labels on people and you don't find people um guilty by association, even, and especially when it's the slimmest association, like, oh, you're also white, you're bad. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be any of your beliefs or values. It just be something you look like. Okay. I think so. You could say this person's left, this person's right, but you could still both be woke if your approach to solving problems is to look at people as groups.
Mhm.
Now, that's not to say don't look at patterns. I think your point of you have to look at patterns is well taken. It's a point well taken. But it's patterns of behavior, not patterns of what kind of person.
Yeah.
And that because, I see this all the time when we use the G word, okay? And it happened on Twitter about a week ago. There was a Media Matters piece out. They went after James Lindsay. They went after people referring to these teachers using that word. And the only reason I'm not
Yeah.
using it right now is I don't
Mhm.
want YouTube to strike me or
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
because
Sorry. I think I said it
they're
at one point.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
But like you're the guest and they'll probably be okay with you saying it because of the way you're saying, but I don't want to, I don't even want to mention in the same breath of James Lindsay. They probably got to search on there and
So now I could probably get away saying the F word more than G word. Is that what you're saying?
you probably could.
That's
You probably
crazy.
could. But I had to comment because it has a meaning.
Mhm.
Most of the people who are groomed are adults. They're by con artists, by religious sects, by partners, romantic partners who are narcissists and things like that. If you go on, spend 5 minutes on YouTube, you'll see like 70,000 channels about surviving narcissistic abuse. Well, the
Yeah.
first step of that is a kind of a grooming, right? It's love
Mhm.
bombing. So it's a term, and it refers to a type of manipulation, psychological manipulation for the purpose of exploitation. Now, that doesn't have to mean sex. And the creepy part is the person doesn't even have to know they're doing it. They could have been likewise brainwashed, and they are like cults do this. They sort of brainwash and they force multiply. Like now, you little brainwashed person, go out and brainwash other
Yeah.
people, right? That's how they recruit. So, I mean, maybe a good word is recruiters. But people get twitchy about that. They're not recruiting. It's like, but they're doing the recruiting behaviors. So what I've tried to advise people to do is say, rather than using the ER to refer to the person, use the ing to refers to the behavior, and then make sure you talk about the specific behaviors. Then it ceases to be like I'm linking a kind of person with the behavior
Mhm.
because they're the kind of person. And that's, I don't want LGBT people or LGBT people for that matter. I don't want people automatically associated. And that was Media Matters thing. Like,
Mhm.
this is an LGBT slur. And I'm like, that's you thinking that. Like,
Yeah.
you're the ones making that connection. The parents who are calling it out, we're calling it out as a form of ideological manipulation. We don't sit here presuming that each individual teacher wants to actually with the kids.
So you're not saying that you think it's a problem to use that word, but you're saying in how people are using it is becoming a problem, that we should
I
use it in a different sort of way.
And not because I'm worried about offending anyone. I'm
Okay.
saying because I want to be precise. I
Mhm.
want to act, and I want people to go back to where words have meanings, like where people really understand this is the correct word. Because if you keep
Okay.
insisting on using the personal, the ER to describe the word, even if it's accurate, but if you insist on doing that in an environment where it's made abundantly clear to you that they're wrong, like they are going to wrongly associate over and over and over, you're going to have to give up the
Mhm.
whole entire concept. And I don't want to do that because it's the accurate word, or it's the accurate form. We just have to use it in its verb form, in my opinion, because then you depersonalize it and you're being more precise, because it is not correct to say that every one of these teachers, come on, they're first and second grade teachers, Susie Smith or whatever, who's 25 years old and she's all excited to go teach kindergarten. And they told her the standard was to use the gender corn. And she goes in with her 6-year-old students and she's got rainbows all over the place in the gender corn discussion and reading a book about, a trans kid or whatever. She's not trying to do what that word implies. She is not that person, but she's doing it. She's doing the manipulation. She's engaging in love bombing. She's engaging in this kind of thing. But do we really want to
Okay.
have that
Yeah.
mentalist? Do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, because there are a lot of teachers that quite literally are showcasing that behavior, and are doing it in a very kind of evil way, I think.
Yeah.
But there are also people or there's also teachers that are just, they're reading the material. They're not necessarily, you know,
Right.
AER, as you like to say.
Right.
So I get your point, and I know that you're not doing it because you're not trying to offend people, but
Now, if somebody is literally, if you can pick up
yeah,
on that and they are literally like, let me
mhm,
tell you about my date last night, little
yeah,
8-year-old, and you can tell me your secrets, and I'm like,
mhm,
okay, yeah, I think they get the ER. But we
yeah,
should refer to that specifically and say, this is why this person is. And I mean, by all means. But what I'm
mhm,
saying is, when you see tweets, for example, of somebody going, we need to teach kids about, like, it's just supporting gender ideology as a concept, right?
yeah,
And then we go back and we say, this person is I mean, they certainly are supporting it, but I just don't
yeah.
know that I don't know that it's going to
It's
move the ball down the field, is my point.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because you're trying to be so precise in what you're saying, and you don't really get that from a lot of people who tend to be on the left. You get them throwing out slurs, calling you racist, and it and it's like, how is this person a racist? They can't really explain it.
No.
So I do see your point. We don't want, God, it's so hard to like fix that though, because everyone is just so fed up now.
Right.
But it
And I
is a
know the purpose behind it, and
yeah.
I don't disagree in the sense that what we want to do, quite correctly, is we want people to associate these behaviors, these books, these lesson plans with something bad. We definitely
Yeah.
want them to have an emotional reaction that is quick. When I
Mhm.
see this gender corn, I immediately think bad thing. Okay. And sometimes attaching a bad word, like when they call people racist, that's what they do, is that
Yeah.
you have an immediate negative reaction. And of course, those of us who oppose gender ideology in the schools think, but we're right and they're wrong. So, I mean, that's easy
Yeah.
to, to
Yeah.
fall into that trap.
Mhm.
So I get it. And I don't disagree with that. I don't want the voices to be cut off
Right.
and silenced needlessly because we get super attached to that particular word to do it. It's like, I think
Mhm.
there's lots of ways to educate people about how this is grooming. This is not good. This is bad behavior. This is recruiting. This is manipulation. This is, evidence of mental illness on the part of the people doing it. Um, Codependency, if not narcissism. But I just don't know that we're going to be effective for very long.
No, I
That's
I
all I'm
don't
saying.
I don't think that. Well, I will say that I think it is pretty insane that Twitter, for example, has decided to fight back so hard on that word to lock people's accounts. Because I know Tim Pool, I'm sure most people here are aware of who he is. His account was locked out because
Yep.
he used that word, but he also provided an image of somebody that was quite literally exhibiting that behavior. So it's pretty accurate. But I guess your point is 100% valid. Like I agree. But then, places like Twitter, do they really care if you're precise? They don't. But I still think that you're right, and we should be careful in how we use it. I just think that unfortunately, I don't know, the groupthink is pretty strong on a lot of sides, because people that don't believe in gender ideology still have a habit of viewing a whole group as a group,
Yeah.
and I see this more and more now, and it kind of makes me a little nervous. It's like what's his name, Christopher Rufo. He does great work. I like what he's putting out there. He's showing you what is happening in schools.
Yeah.
But I mean, even he's said things. He said in a tweet once to the drag queens. He said, I think something like, instead of calling them drag queens, just call them trans drag or something like that. Like he wants them to be labeled as trans. So I'm not going to argue that no one who is a drag queen isn't trans. I mean, it varies. I think historically, most drag queens are just men, right? They're not identifying as a trans. But my
Right.
point here is that even someone like Christopher Rufo, who for the most part he's been like I think 100% on point with the showing us the harm that's happening in schools and whatnot. But even he's going down this like rabbit hole of like using words to define like a whole group.
Right.
So it's like, how do we,
It's hard.
like
It's
what you're
so
saying is
hard.
right, but people get so emotionally just fed up that they don't care. They're just going to label the whole group as is. And it sucks. It sucks to see it. When I saw that tweet, I was like, well, geez, like how do I get somebody like Christopher Rufo to understand that that's not the case for everybody?
Right.
So
Well, one suggestion that I had was, rather than, like I said, with the ER word, I mean, I went back at Twitter and I said, Twitter, what is it that you support about discussing sexuality with prepubescent children?
mhm.
So I put it as like, when you there are certain, like, are they going to ban me for asking that question? It's like,
Yeah.
because what are the behaviors? Like,
Mhm.
why do you think it's okay to cast doubt on a child, on a 6-year-old's parents' trustworthiness when the parent told them they were a boy?
Mhm.
Now they have doubt in their mind. Why do you think this is okay? So when you kind of point blank describe the things they're doing, what they are going to end up having to do, because they're so attached to banning this word or whatever, is they're going to end up having to explain why they're on the side of that, because that's what that word is shorthand for. We use that word as shorthand. We use groomer and grooming as shorthand for these behaviors. So what I've just taken to doing is asking people about the behaviors. Why do you support this behavior? Why do you want to talk to my 10-year-old about anal sex? Just
Yeah.
curious, And then it's like, well, I don't. I'm like, but you objectively do, because you see this book that's in the school library. That's
Right.
literally what it's about. And there's in the lesson plan that's what you're
No,
upset is being banned in Florida.
that's a great way
Then
to phrase it. Yeah.
then what are they going to do? I mean, what are they going to say? I'm against that. Okay, then you're against this lesson plan. No, I'm for
Yeah.
the lesson plan. Why?
Yeah, no, that is yeah, no, I mean, I kind of hate the fact that we have to dance around certain words so much and like find a strategy just to say something.
Isn't it
Meanwhile,
sad?
yeah, it is sad because the other side gets to just
They
make
get
up
to do whatever
words.
the hell they want.
Yeah, they make up words. We have to be careful with the words that we are left to use. And but you're right. I mean, I think redirecting what you're saying, right? Instead of just calling somebody a label, well, why do you think that is? And when I mean, I guess a good way or a good example of what you're saying here is the documentary Matt Walsh did on What
I
Is a
know. I
Woman, right?
loved it.
Yeah.
It
So
was
he
so
just
great.
asked. He wasn't going into these schools, asking them and then calling them, the G word that we're not supposed to use here, but he was asking them what is a woman,
Yeah.
which again, it was a clever way of getting an answer, and then you could decide whether or not this person is a good person or bad person that should be around kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point, something to think
I think
about.
it's because, as Ego Brain is saying out here, first they steal the words and then they steal the meanings, George Orwell. I
Yeah,
think one of the ways you can get out ahead of that is use the meaning, or in other
100%.
words, the longhand, not the shorthand,
Mhm.
and it makes it a lot harder for them to steal the meaning.
Yeah.
So the same thing with, like, I'm against CRT. Well, yeah, I mean, most of us are now, but I would rather say, like, why do you want to segregate the students for a pizza party?
Hmm.
Tell me what the benefit is of labeling the children by the color of their skin and having them see all their differences as potentially negative in a social situation. Like, how is this going to improve their understanding of each other when they're constantly like focusing on their differences? So when you actually describe what employing the tenets does, or what the behaviors and the lessons are actually teaching, why do you want to teach kids that they can't succeed just because of something they had no control over?
Yeah.
And then they're going to go, no, that's not what I want. I'm like, but that's literally what you're saying when you say, and you pull it from the lesson, you say, da, 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 da. How do you interpret that any differently? That's exactly what it says. And then they're backpedaling. They're on the defense, like, because as you said, they get away with saying, oh, you're this, you're that, you're the other. And people tend to get on defense. I'm like, go on offense. Just like, why do you want to go back to 1960?
Yeah. There's
Just
also
curious.
there's also a lot of different ways you can use that word, the G word. It's like, I guess I'll replace that word with like conditioning, right? So you can
Yeah.
condition a kid to
Yep.
be a good person or a bad person. So there's the thought of we're just gonna flat out ban that word from, you can't say it because it's assumed that when you use it, you're talking about an entire group of LGBT people, is like, it's not useful at all.
No.
And it does mean certain things, but yeah, what Eagle Brain here said. First they steal the words, then they steal the meaning, and then you're talking about like focus, getting them to focus on the meaning is exactly it.
Yeah.
And as somebody that survived being called the G word by angry feminists, like I'm still like, how am I
Right.
because I decide to make YouTube videos which are
Right.
mostly for 18 and up.
Yeah.
But yeah, because when I'm thinking, when most people talk about the G word in a negative way, we're thinking like, you know, doing some really bad things to like kids or something. And
Exactly.
so when you don't really have that and you just have someone, I don't know, reading a book to a kid, right? So like I've thought about that one a lot, the whole drag queens reading a book. My first thought is, well, why? Like why can't you just have like, I don't know, a lesbian or a gay guy read a book? Like why does it have to be like this big like show? I don't get it.
Right.
And then, the next point was, right, like, so they're just reading a book. Okay, whatever. I think it's weird. I don't get the point, but they're reading a book. Then I start seeing cases of they're reading a book. This person actually was arrested in the past for, being a sex offender. Okay,
Yeah.
this person was caught for child, I don't know if I could say any of this stuff on your channel. I don't want to, but basically for, a certain kind of pornography
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
underage. So I've seen these patterns of drag queens that read books to kids, and now I'm
Right.
like, well, listen, I'm not going to call them all
Right.
the jerk, but we got to be careful here when it's a
Yep.
grown man that insists on reading books to kids. Like
You
you got to
probably should
wonder,
background check them. Well,
yeah,
you might be
yeah,
interested in a show I did a while back going over a paper. There's an
mm,
actual research paper and it's co-written by a drag queen, Little Miss something or other. Anyway, and it's about drag pedagogy. And it explains how the Drag Queen Story Hour was an invention. It came about for the explicit purpose of queering the students. I mean, and they're talking about the importance of queer theory and making sure that these students are, that queerness is the way to go. It's actually a very old thing. James
yeah,
Lindsay talks about it. Goes back to I think it's Germany or something like that, where the goal actually was to push back on tradition, push back on, the old ways of doing things, social mores. That one of the ways you do it is you take little kids and you go at their sexuality and their view of themselves in, biologically and their gender, in order to fight their parents
mm,
mores. Like, this is how we tear down the social order, is we start with little kids and we queer them, is what they're saying. And they did a whole flipping paper on how they did, which even included admitting how, well, yes, and we can play their game of saying how it's for literacy, but really what it, and I did a whole show because I'm like, they're not even hiding it
Yeah,
anymore.
they
It's
don't
like,
hide
here's
it.
the
Yeah.
research paper that we wrote about how this is our goal. And so when parents are coming out and saying, this isn't about just a fun little story time with somebody dressed up in a fun costume. This is about setting an example for children that they should break all the rules, like break all the social rules, and that has value unto itself. It's like a nihilistic kind of a thing. And so that's why people think it's not benign. But your point is also well taken. This, you got to check into who these people are and why are they doing this? Like, why
Yeah.
do you want to dress up as a woman? And not just a woman, but a stereotypical, over the top, hyper feminized, hyper sexualized woman.
Yeah.
Because remember, what is a woman, right? And if we say adult human female, that has nothing to do with having big boobs and long hair and wearing high heels and glitter,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
That really does have to do with chromosomes and body parts. And so when they're doing that and saying, I'm a woman, it's like, I'm very fascinated by how when a woman gets to be that and when it's this other stuff, it's so contradictory. It's crazy. But talk
Yeah.
about your YouTube channel because you mentioned it. It's how I became aware of you.
Oh yeah.
And I am fascinated by, first of all, your story of Macy Gray was fantastic. Anybody, if you
I almost
haven't
didn't.
seen, if you
That's funny
haven't,
because I actually hated how that turned out. I almost didn't post it.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Well, thank
No, it
you.
was very journalistic. Like I
Okay.
really, really liked it. And I thought you made some excellent insights that even I hadn't thought of. Like you were pausing and listening to her specific words, which is like a thing I love to do. Like
Yeah.
notice the tone, notice this, notice that. So you guys, if you haven't seen it, it's really, really good. And but I'm curious, like, how do you choose what you're like, what fires you up, what gets you saying, I gotta go do either a parody video about this or I gotta do an analysis
Yeah.
of this for people from my
Um,
perspective.
well, I like making people laugh a lot, actually. I like laughing at myself. Self-deprecation is amazing. So, yeah, you were actually talking about you used the word queerness, and I thought, oh yeah, there's that video I need to work on, because because I actually sometimes I stumble across stuff that is just so dumb. Like when I was pretending to be Leah Thomas, I was like, I did that because the interview they did of her was so ridiculous. I'm like, this is so fake. This is absolutely so fake. Same thing with Macy Gray. You can tell that it is so fake. It almost feels like she's reading lines. She's not though, but she's probably like remembering what her agent said or whatever. And it sucks to see somebody act like that because it's not authentic, right? Which again, it's kind of the irony here, where the trans people are always like, we like authenticity, but you want people to literally like say what you believe. But yeah, you said queerness, and there's this video I came across by accident where it's a group of trans people, and they're just staring at the camera, and they're talking about why the word tranny is offensive. And I was laughing watching it because I thought, how ridiculous that these people get to decide what is offensive. But take the word queer, for example. That was a slur. That offends some people. And it doesn't matter. I've literally seen a shirt at Target. I saw a shirt that said queer. And I'm like, how weird is that?
I
Queer, like,
absolutely remember when that was like the meanest thing you could say to
yeah.
somebody. It wasn't that long ago.
So my point is, like, if you want to call yourself queer, that's fine. But if it's okay to if it's okay to like, normalize the word queer and say it's not a slur, put it on a shirt. Why not tranny? Oh, that one's offensive. Why not faggot? Oh, that one's offensive. So again, I just don't like how a certain group gets to select what's offensive. So basically, whenever they're offended by something, I just want to use it because I can, which is actually one of the nice things about calling myself trans. I know some people hate that I do that because I'm promoting it, but you know what? It's a great tool. I'm going to use it like as much as I can. Doesn't mean that I believe everything behind trans. And there's a lot to debate, with the words transition and detransition. Well, what are you transitioning from in detransition? I get that 100%, but to go to those people that specifically say that I can't say something and throw it in there, I love doing that. So I find, I like humor a lot. I mean, and then I don't know, sometimes, and I don't know if you feel like this after consuming the internet, you just want to be like, you know what? I'm going to turn this off and just check out. And you take a break, and then coming back feels painful. You're like, why did I ever even do this? Like, spend hours talking to people. Like, it's great, but I'm so sick and tired of debating this stuff. This shouldn't even be a debate. Like kids are not allowed to consent. Like that, how is that a debate? But yeah, I guess the thought of ignoring it all makes me almost feel guilty. I don't know about you, but you wanna actively participate and do something. If it's adding humor to the insanity that is our world today.
Yeah.
Like I love doing that, but I'm sure there's something that influences you to keep having these conversations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's being a mom. I mean, that's probably like
Yeah,
people talk about the word identity all the time, and
the
they get
future
they
of your
put
girls, right? Like,
right, and
yeah,
it's just, but to me, it's like I, I don't even think of myself as a woman. I don't think of myself as white. All these identity markers they claim
yeah,
are identity markers. I'm like, I am mom. Like that is like what I am. I had my first child, and I was like, this is my world. I mean, that may not be true for everybody, but that was for me, and it's like having little pieces of your heart walking around outside your body for the rest of your
mhm,
life.
yeah,
And so when you realize that you know something that maybe other people don't know, or you can look at something in a way that they're struggling with because they're busy, they're working, or they just aren't in this world. And I used to be a
mhm,
teacher way back. You feel like, I don't know, I feel sort of compelled to help them,
yeah,
help the other parents so they can help their kids, and we can protect them from
mhm,
adults who don't have their best interests at heart, while at the same time fighting for values I believe in, like liberty for its own, liberty, period. Liberty for you to be you and me to be me. And just like what you said about Macy Gray, it really hit me. She's sitting there talking to, uh, what's his name? The British dude.
oh my
What
god, I should know this.
senior moment? Pierce Morgan.
Pierce,
That's,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, and she's talking about how, the flag and the Constitution need a reboot. She can't really think of anything good
Yeah,
about being American or whatever. And you stopped and you made a comment like, you can say whatever you want to say. And that's something that was so refreshing to hear, because although she probably can and I can't, right? But that the United States is still one of the only countries, I think it may be the only country, that has a First Amendment the way ours is.
yeah,
And one of the things that bothers me about all this, the trans stuff, is that I think they tried it with CRT and it didn't work. And so they're all sort of like moved on and put the burden on,
mhm,
this ideology to carry water for the concept that freedom of speech is bad. Because ultimately, if you can take away that First Amendment right, then it's over. You can be Canada or Australia
I
or
mean,
any
look
of
at
the other.
UK too. UK,
You
they'll show up at your door when you misgender somebody on Twitter. Like, do we
correct.
want that? That's pretty scary.
Exactly. And that, I think that they're trying to condition our children to be comfortable with the notion that you can say this, you can't say that, because feelings. And if you start young enough, you can get people, and
Mhm,
you don't teach them about the First Amendment actually was, you can end up with Macy Gray. You can
yeah,
end up with Macy Gray, who authentically accidentally says, oh, it's a fact that a woman's a woman and a man's a man and this and that, without any hesitation. Like you pointed out, she didn't even hesitate for a second to tell the actual truth.
yeah.
Then she goes on to plug, her, what was it, her book or something,
Her new album
or her new
called The
album.
Great Reset or something like
I don't know.
that.
And she's sitting
Yeah,
there, and like you said, I really felt like her PR person, whoever, was just like, here's your script, say these words. It was a learning experience and all this stuff. And it's like,
sad to
you
see.
are a famous person with an album out and you have this audience, and you're going to backtrack.
Mhm,
It's then you don't need them to take away the First Amendment. People are here you go.
yeah,
Like giving it away with both hands. And I think they're trying to condition our kids to by first of all never teaching them what it is, and then
mhm,
second of all conditioning them that there's okay words and bad words, and you can't say this, you can't say that. And it's not this is nice and that is not nice. It's you can and can't. You'll get
yeah.
punished for
People need
wrong
to
think.
people need to realize that there are a lot of people in this country um, that hate America, and they might hate America for, or not they might. I know for a fact they hate America for false reasons, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
being conditioned to do this in
Yep.
schools and colleges. These are people that have been misdirected because professors and their ideology, they're putting it onto kids. And I think that's what matters to me too is I don't have kids, but I have nephews, I have nieces, and I care about them. And when I think about their future, I'm like, my God, what is their future going to be? You know,
Exactly.
what if my niece becomes, I don't know, like an athlete? What if that's ripped away because of a man? Like, these are
Exactly.
things that matter, should matter to any person that cares. Like, it's not about me, you know. It's not, you know. And this is why, like, I can't stand people who are like, oh, you're just trying to, you know, promote your channel and be this and that. I mean, yeah, it's cool to get views, but also, like, I actually really care about this country. My parents fled Cuba to come to this country. Okay, I wasn't born in Cuba, but my parents left behind what they loved in their country because of, you know, communism and bad things happening there, to come here. And a lot of people just, you know, they pretend that this country is horrible. Yeah, horrible things happened in the past. Maybe horrible things still happen, but there's also good things that happen.
Right.
Many good things, and those things are never talked about. I mean,
No.
it's like it
No.
doesn't matter. And you know, the future of this country, like, I want to say that there's a chance. I try to stay optimistic. It's really hard some days. I'm sure you feel it too, because
Mm-hmm.
it feels like I'm fighting against a mafia or something. You know,
Yep.
when this ideology has captured everything, when the government is now working with these activists, how do I fight this? You know, and this is,
Exactly.
and that's why I feel on some days so defeated, because I'm one person. Okay, my channel's not huge, so I'm one person. I'm trying to just influence other people to speak out because, dude, we're up against the government now, and you have to ask yourself, if the government is pushing your kids to transition, does the government care about your kid? Probably not. So
No, and I'm not sure they ever did, but if
mm,
you still need more evidence, like I've been saying for a long
I
time,
don't
like
know how.
decades, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure what we have to do to
yeah,
explain to you that the government run education system is not for your child's best interest. And when they start pushing this stuff as official policy, there's so many states now where this is the affirmative model, is the
yeah.
official policy. In New Jersey, they create two separate files for the student, one the parent can see and one the parent cannot see.
That's crazy.
And
This
that
is
way
where
they can, in New Jersey, it's official
huh.
policy that they will affirm as young as 6 years old, as young as kindergarten. The policy is to affirm on the basis of self-diagnosis by the 6-year-old.
At this
They
rate,
don't even need a counselor's
yeah,
intervention I mean, what other mental illness do you get to self-diagnose
that's
and people
exactly
begin
it.
to medicalize it?
Yeah, that's. But again, it's not a medical issue. So it's like, okay, is it a medical issue? It's not a medical issue. That's insane. At this point, to me, you know what would really solve this? Any baby that's born, they're trans. Screw it. They're all trans until they identify as not trans. Like, I say that this is obviously a joke. I'm really, like, it's a joke, but that's
Yeah,
how
we're
far
kidding.
do we have to go that far? Because I could see that happening. Just
There are
don't.
parents doing that now. This baby is
Yeah.
gender neutral. Yeah, they're doing that.
You saw the other day that historians now, they when they discover bones, they don't want to. It's not like, listen, I'm female to the bone. I know this for a fact. Like, it's sad that we have to go this far, but you know what? Again, like, parents. I mean, parents have the power to do a lot. Do not lose communication with your child. That I will say. You know, don't fight them on it. Don't affirm them. Just keep an open, like, open communication. And if you can disconnect them from certain things that are pushing them over the edge to become more trans, like, just, you know, keep an open mind. Sad to
I
say
think
everything I
parents should
just said
be
is conversion therapy, but yeah.
well. Well, if you're thinking of things like
Mhm.
disconnect them, then maybe we as parents need to fight harder to get the tech out of the classrooms in the first place,
Yeah.
and to get the school to stop recommending apps, and to get, they're recommending Trevor Project app
Yeah.
with a forum that has a kill switch right away. A lot of the websites for sex ed have a thing that when you go there, it says, just know that this won't save in your history, and you can click this button at any time to leave, and it won't be in an, oh, and don't forget, you can hide this. And it's like, where in the history of the world has it been okay for total strangers online to tell minor children,
Mhm.
here's how to hide this from your parents as part of the original screen that they go to? And schools are recommending this. Parents should be at the school door by the hundreds, not just protesting, but basically saying, you will not do this. Like, it's not a protest. You will not do this. And if they
They're
pooled all
yeah.
the resources to sue them, like, maybe it would do something.
They are literally they're I mean, they're trying to rip apart, you know, the families, right?
Yeah.
Families are going to be torn apart by this trans thing. It's I mean, it's a great way if you know, if the goal for some activists, and I'm not going to say all of them, but if the goal here, which I do believe in some sense it is, the goal is to completely dismantle, you know, the true values of America, to kind of like redo everything, right? The flag, the Constitution, the amendments, right?
Yep.
They constantly keep talking about this stuff. If that is the goal, because this country is so bad, we hate it. Well, what a great way to start convincing people by brainwashing them into believing there's something they're not. And
Exactly. You
dumbing
get
them
people
down.
confused
Yep.
and you get people divided because there's no way. I don't care how, you know, and Bill Maher kind of made a joke about it. Where he said, you know, we're at this rate by 2024
Oh, yeah.
or whatever, like everyone will
That
be
was
gay.
great. Yep.
That was pretty funny.
There goes
But
our species.
yeah, but at the same time, I really do believe there are people
Mm.
sitting over in the WEF who think this is how we're going to reduce the population to 1 billion from 7 billion is we're
Yeah.
going to sterilize people. But there will always be that remnant of people who are like, yeah, that's a bridge too far for me, whatever they're pushing. But again, like that's how they sort people. That's how they get us fighting amongst ourselves. That's how they keep
Yeah.
us distracted from whatever they're actually doing. Like, oh, let's go over while they're busy discussing how you shouldn't use the ER word, the G with the ER or the G with ING or whatever. Let's be over here wrecking the economy some more so we can just own everything and they won't have anything and they'll eat bugs.
That's
I mean,
exactly
I don't know.
it.
But
yeah, no, I agree with you. The whole eat bugs thing, and I mean, it sounds. I understand how it sounds, but that's they say these things. You know, it's not like nobody has said it. Like Bill Gates has said stuff like this, so we know that that could be a plan in the future. And I mean, when you're getting these kids completely confused about who they are, right? If you don't know who you are, who I am, like for example, as an adult, right? Figuring out who I am in some way leads me to a path of finding my purpose. So if kids don't know who they are and they're growing up obsessed and confused over gender, what sense of purpose do they have? They
it
have
won't
no
come
sense.
from inside anyway.
Absolutely
It will
not.
be assigned.
Exactly.
It was somebody, you know, so we're all upset about the sex assigned at birth, but we don't seem to worry about the job that's going to be assigned at 18.
Precisely.
The position in society, the social credit, the whatever's going to be attached because you did or didn't go along with the zeitgeist of the time or whatever. And remember too, we know from history that these things can turn on a dime. In the Weimar Republic, it was all fun all the time. They had trans clubs. They had, you know, there was a homosexual reform a movement to make it okay to be gay in public, whatever thing, which, you know, you might say, okay, that's good, right? From prior history, but it went too far. And it went to the point where they were like in people's faces and was like, just like now. And when the backlash came, as we know that it did, who were the first people? The first ones, even before the Jews, even before the communists, who were the first people sent to the camps, right? So, you know, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, you know, we need to learn from history.
Yeah.
That these are things are meant to divide us.
I was going to say, to me, what's crazy is that, so the conservative side, when it came to like gay rights and things like that, you know, they used to be fearful. They're like, oh, they're going to come for our kids. They're going to be degenerates, all this stuff, right? That, you know, and back then we're like, that's crazy talk. No, now look where we're at, right? That's exactly what's happening. Now, another thing that's happening is the left is saying, oh, they're going to come for our rights, our gay marriage and all this stuff. Well, you know what? That could actually happen. And I'm not saying that I want it to happen, obviously not. But when you're pushing an extreme, you're going to get an extreme back. And that's why, like, I appreciate people like Matt Walsh and any other conservatives for talking about, you know, gender ideology, the harm that it's causing kids, and, you know, for platforming detransitioners. I love that they're doing that, but they always miss another part of it, right? And that's where I'm like, I wish they could see it more differently, because they only focus on the harm. They don't ever seem to focus on, for example, that there are gender nonconforming people. Like that needs to be addressed, to not be forgotten that because somebody is a boy and likes to dress a certain way, that doesn't mean they're trans. Gender nonconforming people exist. We need to embrace that idea so that people are aware, and not everything is, you know, good trans, bad, all trans. So I
think we just went back to basic human dignity and treating people as individuals, you know,
like you said,
it just, we the golden rule Like, you don't need, just because you, being decent and treating other individuals with respect, living by the non-aggression principle, and all this kind of stuff, does not mean you need to celebrate the choices they make or the life they live or who they are. There, you can, again, it's like, I know where I end and you begin. And, I'm not interested, it's like, whatever floats your boat, just don't sink mine kind of deal. Right.
Yeah.
And if we could do that, that'd be fine. Why can't we just teach that? But instead, what we've done is we've gone from, acceptance to celebration to now normalization. And the problem with normalization is, first of all, it's a scientific lie. As you pointed out, there's disorders, okay? And they have to be recognized as such. And then the people who may need certain kinds of mental health care, whatever, won't get it because you've now normalized it. You've made it like, this is just another kind of normal, right? So, what's to stop somebody who quite literally needs mental health care from running for president? And we can't criticize that.
That's true.
Or they're the director of health and human freaking services.
Right. I mean, we got to be
puberty
inclusive.
blockers are perfectly fine.
Oh my God. No, exactly. We've got to be inclusive. And it's insane. And you were talking about I was thinking, man, it's so crazy how they don't want trans to be like a mental health issue at all. But these are the same people that you look at their bio, right, on Twitter or whatever, and it says she, her, they, then it'll say on the spectrum, autistic, also have anxiety. There are only some things that apparently some disabilities are okay to celebrate. Some mental health issues are okay to celebrate. But if you say that a trans person might have some kind of disorder, oh my God, that's like a sin. You can't say that.
They're turning illnesses into identities. I seriously, I'm not even kidding. I almost want to add to my profile on Twitter, like arthritic, postmenopausal. I think it would be like hilarious. Doing a thing like that where like maybe you should do one of your parody things and I'll come on and I'll be that person. Like, I identify.
Don't give me ideas, I'll do them.
All right. Well, I do want to wrap it up because I've kept you for so long, and I do want to make sure everybody remembers to go and subscribe to Mars's channel, okay? Because I really think you do great work. I hope you keep doing it. One of the reasons I brought you on here is for exactly what you said, that I know there are people out there, like, I get very defensive actually of people, whether any kind of person that's getting lumped into a group, I get defensive. Doesn't matter who they are. If somebody says conservatives are all like this, I'm like, no, they're not. So then I want to platform people to express themselves and say, not in my name, like, don't say that in my name. And homeschoolers, people, LGBT, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to show people, like, the reason we learn, like, it's a play on words.
Yeah.
We learn, the reason we learn is so we can think, and we also have to learn reason. We have to learn how to think. We have to learn how to think properly using logic and reason and all these things, and not just like, oh, look, squirrel, talking point. I just repeat stuff like I'm just a bundle of amygdala, and that's what we've become. And so when I saw your work, I said, this is somebody I wanted to know you. I just thought you were cool. So I wanted to have a conversation with you. You made me laugh. Anybody who makes me laugh these days, especially about these topics, is aces in my book.
Awesome.
And then I really I just wanted people to hear your perspective. I thought you had a unique perspective that does not get enough attention. I firmly believe that you are much more representative of people like yourself than what we're seeing on the news.
Oh, exactly.
And 100%. Unfortunately, how do you go out and find people and be like, come and talk, So I found you and you're here, and thank you so much for spending this time and enduring my jabbering.
Oh no, it was great talking to you. I was trying to keep up with the chat, but it was hard to, I mean, it was a great conversation. And, it's funny, your channel is called The Reason We Learn. I did learn a few things because you got me thinking a lot about that G word, which when I was attacked and people were calling me the G word, I thought, like, I don't understand how this is useful. But then I hear people saying, no, it's very effective if you call people. But then it's like, some people maybe, but not all people.
Right.
You definitely got me thinking about, focusing on, the why and, the behavior, not labeling people, but this person is this person is clearly that G word because of these reasons. So
Exactly.
it's been a great chat, and I'll definitely think about that possible video idea. So
Yes, I think that would be funny. But anyway, thanks to everybody who came. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Subscribe to
Upper Hand Mars.
upperhandMars, and you have another channel too.
I do have another channel. Yeah, the
It's
Bullseye Report, which is I co-host with my buddy Justin, and we talk about like mostly politics, and it's just a conversation. It's a hanging out kind of a thing that I do.
okay.
But yeah, check it
Right.
out too. Thank you
Check
so
those both
much.
out, and we'll talk some more, I'm sure. But I hope everybody has a great day. Replay will be up right away if you want to watch ad free on Patreon or Subscribe Star. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
it easy, everyone.
Bye. Take it easy.